that's that. She's not related to the Skywalkers in any way, shape, or form. She just identifies as a Skywalker, basically, right? So, the other missed opportunity, obviously, were the flash fights. The flash fights sound amazing of what George originally wanted to do. You guys may recall that we talked about this for a number of months, where they were going to these segments in this movie that featured Mustafar, Tatooine, Naboo, all of our fan favorite, worlds of the Skywalker saga that had been around for years upon years, that were going to make appearances in the movie, where both Rey and Kylo Ren would essentially be fighting across space and time, where it would basically be a evolution of the Force back vision that Rey had in The Force Awakens, where you do see her in the the little Coruscant, or not the Coruscant, in the corridors, I should say, of Bespin, where she goes through the corridors of Bespin, and you actually see that moment in which she's able to walk through it. It was going to be similar to that, except they would be engaging in a lightsaber duel, where it would have been something very unique by Abrams and George that was ultimately deleted by, of course, Disney and Lucasfilm. Again, a big mistake. I don't know why they did this, but we'll have to wait and see. We've got 5 days to go until this movie drops. Fans will be able to determine the movie for themselves, what they really think about it. But the majority of what we have to talk about is through everything related to Rey, how it's snowed, like I say, going over this right here in space now, and things really are taking that right from any segment of this movie, if I really have to be honest with you. So anyways, guys, drop a comment below. Let me know all this in the comments. If you guys enjoy the content, make sure to drop a thumbs up on the video. I thank you all so very much for the kind support, and I'll catch you guys next time.
Need a reload!
Out of ammo. Gonna be out of ammo.
I'm here to kill you, whoever you are.
The real question is, who are you? I mean, seriously, man, you've been waiting for like 5 years. So, you use the dark side at your whim, and use the anger swelling within you now. It's all
Yeah. Oh, guns. Fuck.
Skywalker, don't use too much of the Force. I don't want you to get tired and die again.
motherfucker.
Hang on! Quick reload!
Ah, you fucking...
Such a pity. How much grander and more powerful you could have still become. Oh well, whatever.
Oh, you. Oh my god. Oh my god. You're the Emperor. You're the Emperor.
Yes, yes, and you're the little runt who thinks he's Vader.
Master, teach me. I know I can be everything he was. Please. I want to be just like him. It's my dream.
Really?
Oh my
Motherfucker.
Suckers. If this was their tragedy.
How am I gonna say piece of shit.
Hey guys, what's going on today? So, today's video is going to cover how Boba Fett survived Sarlacc pit 3 times. So, we did it twice in Legends, and then once in canon. Well, it is in canon, and it's alluded that he may have survived. You guys will find out brief description. So, I'm wondering if we're going to know more about him in the Mandalorian. I really hope we
Reload.
are. I really hope he's not dead, because it was, I don't know, there was some cool, what can I say? And I just felt like his death was so unexpected. It wasn't really Mandalorian.
Don't say I didn't warn you! What's even real?
However, in Legends, the fall didn't actually kill him. He was immobilized. Then slowly identified
Don't trust this line!
heavily damaged Boba Fett. That's when, suddenly, in Legends, choice but to jump clear of the sandcrawler, which was now speeding out of control towards the Sarlacc and topple right in. Boba still inside. How long he remained within it again, not really sure. But Boba Fett found himself inside the engine for the second time in as many days as slowly than before. But since he jumped it before, he managed to get into the now ever. That's when the Cybermen really coming here. Dengar had come to the moon to search the sail barge to see if he could find somewhere. He was ready to give up when he noticed that the Sarlacc was a great and then he spotted a badly burned
Fuckers don't stop.
where he
That was all me!
covered his body and worked at healing it. Eventually, the fearsome bounty hunter recovered, and both he and Dengar would go on having a rival-ally type of relationship. Boba Fett was even the cybernetic Corellian's best man at his wedding. As this is a complete legend story, there are some inconsistencies. The Sarlacc was clearly killed when Boba escaped, yet about a year later, he returned to it in his slave too. Because of his prior telepathic connection to Susejo, he was soon able to communicate with the immense creature once again. For his own reasons, however, Boba Fett decided to destroy the Sarlacc at that particular point, promised. So, what about the plan? Well, there are hints that he might be. After the death of Jabba the Hutt, a couple of travelers discovered a Jawa sandcrawler and found within its hull parts of a packed sail barge and an abandoned set of partially melted and disfigured. Now, if that's not a clear sign as to Boba Fett having survived, I don't know what is. I mean, how would that get there? Maybe someone went in there and grabbed it and pulled it out, but they would be stuck, or, I don't know, maybe they used it. But I really think that they would go to that extent, and after that, it's just a lame story. I think Boba Fett is alive. I think he won't come back. I think there might be some inspiration from
That
legends.
bandit spine's not actually gonna work. I just wanted some
The show is
payback
awesome.
because
There's
those
tons of fan
bastards
service
broke
in
my
there, and it's
machine.
just, it really just
Still,
feels
I
like Star Wars. It
appreciate
feels like
your
an amazing
dedication
story,
to
and it
capitalism.
really takes me back to
You've
the
already
original
got a
story.
shock skag spine. Try
How could it
that.
not?
It will work much better, I promise.
I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave a like on it if you did. Let me
Well
know what you
done,
think
Vault
about Boba
Hunter.
Fett Returns.
Now you have access to my
Maybe
vast
some
array of
if you know what
murderous
you think of
wares
the
in a
movie,
new
which
convenient
could take place
location.
before or after
And as an added
So,
thank you for
really,
dishing
it's
out
up to
some
you.
vengeance on
I hope
those
it's gonna
filthy
adapt. We're
bandits,
still leaving
let
on
me
that
open
cliffhanger
up
from
my
episode
secret
5,
stash for
where
you.
we
Who
heard the
says
Spurs
payback
walking,
doesn't
the mysterious
pay,
man
huh?
with the Spurs. So I'm hoping that's Boba Fett, but a lot of people are saying that it could be someone else.
What?
But who knows? If you guys
You did a
enjoyed
what?
this one, catch you in the next one. In Legends, Darth Maul was given very explicit orders to kill Qui-Gon Jinn on Naboo by Darth Plagueis through Lord Sidious because he felt that Qui-Gon would be a danger to the revenge of the Sith, although he didn't know why. So what reasons did the Sith have to fear Qui-Gon? First, in canon, Qui-Gon Jinn was arguably the most powerful Jedi, with the wisdom that was on par with both Masters Yoda and Anakin. He was also the first Jedi to return from the Netherworld. He was a Jedi who was not only swayed by the rules of the Council, and most importantly felt that the Jedi Council had begun to lose their way in connection to the Force. He felt they were too involved in politics.
Without it, you're just a
It was
schmuck
this
with a
weakness
paperweight.
in the Jedi that was most exploited by
I used to have one just like that.
Qui-Gon, however, sought to follow his father's orders and very confidently well before he was carried out. It was he, after all, that sensed Darth Maul as a Sith, despite the rest of the council not believing so.
Support local
As they said,
business.
I
Sell
don't
to
think the
Marcus.
Sith would return. The second reason for the Sith to worry about Qui-Gon is that he understood the prophecy of the Chosen One in a way that no other Jedi did. Since it had been so long since its inception, the Jedi had largely stopped studying it, and some, including Yoda, had believed the Jedi
Guys for suckers and psychos. Try not to resist. It's the hell.
Fuck is this?
Rather than seeing them as separate identities. Qui-Gon knew the prophecy of the Chosen One also spoke of the sacrifice of the Jedi and the cleansing of the order of the Sith. He also knew the prophecy of the return of the Sith. Undoubtedly, he did or would have put these two prophecies together as happened. All these things
With smirches just everybody.
whether or not he trained Anakin Skywalker. Qui-Gon believed that Anakin was the chosen one and would have been sure that Anakin knew the inside and out, especially if they concerned him. Qui-Gon would have taught them to serve as a warning to the young Padawan, and very well could have spared Anakin from his dark fate. Also, because Qui-Gon certainly sensed the darkness within Anakin, he would have been able to better help Anakin choose the light as a tool against the dark, rather than trying to ignore it completely as the Jedi taught. Another reason that Qui-Gon would have been a powerful master to Anakin is because Anakin Skywalker's fall to the dark side was precipitated because of his love of Padme. The new canon book Master and Apprentice hints that Qui-Gon Jinn himself may have had his own forbidden love, but that he ultimately chose the Jedi path over love. Why or how remains a mystery, but Qui-Gon even always carried a Mustafarian fire diamond that he received from him. You may be saying, though, hey, how is that different from Obi-Wan and the Mandalorian Duchess Satine? On the surface, it's the same. Obi-Wan recounted his lessons learned from choosing the Order over Satine on numerous occasions, but I believe he also highly suspected Anakin's relationship with Padme, but chose to ignore it. Now, I'll get into why in another video. Long story short, though, I don't believe Qui-Gon would have ignored it. I think he would have been open with Anakin, spoken to him frankly about it, and helped Anakin make the decision
fucking
that
car.
best followed the Force and put down the dark side. The last reason the Sith needed to fear Qui-Gon and why Qui-Gon was such a better teacher for Anakin was because Qui-Gon would not underestimate Dooku as the Jedi did prior to the Clone Wars. Jin would certainly have sensed the dark side in Dooku long before Master Yoda, and perhaps
Don't worry, you can still look at me.
Yoda
They're singing songs about that one. I live for this!
Jedi overcame another one that was more in line with let me know what you think. Until then,
When Palpatine was attempting to sway the Jedi Anakin Skywalker to the dark side, he offered him two things that Anakin craved above all: power and knowledge. He told Anakin he could teach him the ways of the dark side and show him how to save his pregnant wife. But after becoming Darth Vader and being severely crippled, we don't ever get to witness Darth Vader undergo any substantial training. So this raises the question, why was Darth Vader's training so limited, and what did Palpatine teach Vader, and in what ways? After his defeat on Mustafar, and after being rebuilt, Vader found his life in the suit maddening. His existence became filled with never-ending pain. This, coupled with his great amount of regret for his life as Anakin Skywalker, not only resulted in a physical change, but a new personality seemed to completely take over. Initially, Vader was left to his own devices to train, his power in the Force still present, but severely limited by his injuries. Vader could feel where his power had been, but he could not touch, and bend what he previously could have. After a short while of personal training, Vader was commissioned by Palpatine to execute the remaining Jedi. Initially, Vader thought himself unprepared, but the prospect of finding his former master Obi-Wan Kenobi drove him forward. In his first post-suit encounter with Jedi, Vader successfully managed to kill 8 Jedi in total, but the battle was long and hard-fought. Palpatine, somewhat disappointed with his apprentice's performance, created a rumor Vader had killed 50 Jedi on that day. At first, Vader was frustrated due to his lack of training by Palpatine, but really, all the things he had desired had left him anyway. Instead, Vader began embracing his pain and his cybernetic suit. His immense pain granted the Sith far more power in the dark side than is common, and although his cybernetics were hard to use, he eventually mastered them, as well as using his increased strength and durability to the fullest extent. Although Palpatine was a master duelist, he again refused to teach Vader, so Vader began drilling himself, learning from his mistakes in past battles, and retooling his style completely to play to his strengths. What resulted was a masterpiece of a hybridized lightsaber form. Vader did not use one set form, but took bits and pieces of others that resulted in a style completely unique to himself. During this period, Palpatine for the first time began to see the true potential that still lied with Vader, despite his injuries. Because of this, he did opt to train him, but not in the traditional sense. Palpatine explained that Vader's training as a Jedi was hugely beneficial, and that he had already began to master the dark side, as it was, after all, an easier practice to pick up than the light. Vader's training as a Jedi had taught him to duel, and his rage made his power in the Force substantial. Instead of repeating that, Palpatine opted to train Vader with tests, sending him on missions, both combatively related and otherwise. Vader continued hunting down the remaining Jedi, which honed his skills a great deal, but Palpatine also began sending Vader on more political missions to test his skills as a negotiator, and to show him the way of the Sith was not always to crush one's enemies, but sometimes stab them through the back. Initially, what began as not training Vader out of spite turned into fear, as Palpatine witnessed Darth Vader truly had become more powerful than he had imagined following his injuries. Palpatine witnessed others create monsters and cyborgs designed specifically to defeat Vader, and time again, Vader conquered them. Palpatine witnessed Vader be crushed and seemingly killed, surviving for days only using his own hatred and the dark side, and an act, I may add, surprised Palpatine himself a great deal. Because of this, Palpatine began purposefully holding power and knowledge back from Vader. With Dooku and Maul, he had always known he was more powerful than them. With Dooku, he realized he was never intended to be a permanent apprentice. And after Mustafar, Palpatine one day intended to toss Vader aside too, but this Sith would not die, and would not be defeated. Realizing this, and the power the Chosen One still commanded, Palpatine thought back to the words he had said long ago. Choose someone as a successor, and you will inevitably be succeeded. Choose someone hungrier than you, and you will be devoured. Choose someone quicker, and you won't dodge the blade at your back. Choose someone with more patience, and you won't block the blade at your throat. Choose someone quicker, and you won't dodge the blade at your back. Choose someone with more patience, and you won't block the blade at your throat. Choose someone more devious, and you'll hold the blade that kills you. Choose someone more clever, and you'll never know your end. Despite these cautions, an apprentice is essential. A master without an apprentice is a master of nothing. It is an apprentice's duty to learn all that he can from the master, and the master's right to refrain from revealing all of his secrets. Palpatine never ended up teaching Vader abilities like Force Lightning, simply because he was not capable of it, but now he saw Vader progressing, even without his aid. In this period, Vader had truly grasped his power and his new suit, and began searching for knowledge for himself, since his master seemed unwilling to share his. Vader would go on to discover powerful artifacts and holocrons, and learn several new Force abilities of his own. In the end, Palpatine barely trained Vader because he had already attained much of the abilities he required to combat the Jedi on his own. Also, Vader was simply a natural for the dark side. As stated earlier, the whole existence of Anakin Skywalker was nearly obliterated, as Vader quite literally became a new person. Vader was fueled by the mistakes of Anakin, but he was no longer that man. In many ways, Vader never acquired deeper training from Palpatine, and after the first several years as his apprentice, he stopped asking to be trained. Vader was similar to his Legends grandson, Jason Solo. He had all the pieces and knowledge set in place. It required the necessary doors to be opened to fully embrace them. This is what Jason Solo's own Sith Master said to him. Are there techniques to teach me? Not techniques as much as awareness. Technique is for apprentices. You know all you need to know. It's within you. You have to become aware of it and embrace it. Now that we've explained it, I'd love to hear your opinion on this. Do you think that Palpatine was right and justified by this, or do you think that he should have trained Vader? What do you think Vader would look like if he had undergone the training? If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like, as it helps the channel out a great deal.
They might look small, but they're actually just far away.
It's a good thing I can't feel for them because yowza!
Stay up to date with everything.
One more satisfied customer.
May the force be with you. Have a great day.
Your business is always appreciated.
When Darth Vader was crippled by his former friend and mentor, for decades following, two thoughts remained sharp within his mind, that he was to become as powerful as possible, and that he would kill the man that placed him within a living torture chamber. For decades, the Dark Lord of the Sith was tormented by visions of his defeat at the hands of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and for years searched for the Jedi Master, and yet he never found him. In reality, Obi-Wan had chosen to hide himself away on a planet that should have been quite familiar to the Dark Lord. He was in fact raised there. However, despite this, Vader never found
Go kill the other
So
guy.
this raises the question, why is this? Why is it that with all the might of the Empire behind him, and familiarity with the very places Tormentor chose to hide himself away, he never found him? The answer to this question is extremely compelling. For starters, I would like to look at another example of a Jedi that successfully hid himself away from the Empire during the Dark Days. Grandmaster Yoda was able to hide on the planet of Dagobah due to it having limited intelligent life, but more importantly, due to an overwhelming presence of the dark side of the Force on the planet. Dagobah is what is referred to as a dark side nexus, meaning it's a location with a very potent connection to the dark side, especially within its cave. Yoda chose a location like this because of his own presence and stance in the Force. Yoda, being one of the most powerful Jedi and light side users in galactic history, required a location that would balance out his signature in the Force, and thus chose Dagobah. Obi-Wan Kenobi also utilized such a location during his exile. Although nowhere on the same level of Dagobah, Tatooine still held a dark connection to the Force, mainly because of its inhabitants and dark history, as Tatooine had once been a fertile planet, but was ravaged by war. In A New Hope, Obi-Wan even somewhat references the dark aura of Tatooine's largest city, where he comments, quote, "Mos Eisley Spaceport, you will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy." This tactic, of course, worked, as although the dark presence of the planet was nothing compared to that of Dagobah, so was Obi-Wan's connection to the Force compared to that of Yoda. The second, and perhaps more crucial reason, Lord Vader was never able to go to Obi-Wan.
We'll look at that tonight.
Not exclusively in the Force, but rather Vader's creation of the Force. Besides killing Obi-Wan, told perhaps even more crucial to Darth Vader and Skywalker, Vader was the and that he failed to achieve all Vader was good and the right thing.
Some cover! I can see that!
other locations throughout the galaxy. The planet was also largely controlled and operated by the Hutt clan, not the Empire, which was a big factor behind their limited involvement. And as a final reason, Obi-Wan used the Force very limited on the planet, as he would not frequently reach out to others at all, instead keeping to himself mostly, and focusing more on meditation than grand acts using the Force. By doing this, Obi-Wan actually took a page out of Darth Sidious's book, who had successfully hidden from the Jedi Order for years. So all of these factors are what contributed to Vader and the Empire being unable to find Obi-Wan on Tatooine, and Luke as well for that matter, despite killing Obi-Wan Kenobi being one of his biggest goals. All of these factors, and of course Obi-Wan Kenobi his name was Ben, probably helped out the most. So what is this again has been connected by Darth Vader and the Empire ever found Obi-Wan Kenobi on Tatooine? If not, what would you have preferred as an explanation? To find the time and kill the nerd, I would really appreciate it if you could decide and to help the video and the channel out. If you haven't already, just subscribe and his master's constant obsession over it. However, one day, a boy arrived to Coruscant with his cold disease and chosen one. Sidious at first was shocked, but then saw a golden opportunity to corrupt the boy and use his great power to destroy the Jedi and bring the Sith back to prominence. When Sidious had finally enacted his master plan to destroy the Jedi and had finally turned this once chosen one to the dark side, he was overjoyed. All had gone his way, and his new apprentice, Lord Vader, would become more powerful than he could ever imagine. But then tragedy reached Sidious. Reaching out through the Force, he discovered that his apprentice had been gravely injured and was near death. After finding Vader defeated and crippled, Sidious was furious, angered by the prospects of this once mighty Sith. Because of this failure, Sidious wished to find Vader, placing him in a suit that was just as much a closer device as it was armor. Sidious desired Vader to be stuck in a place of never-ending pain and torment, trapped by his actions and his body itself. Sidious personally ordered the suit to be especially weak to Force lightning, that if he ever desired, he could end Vader right then and there with his skill with the ability. Sidious never intended for Vader to remain his apprentice for much longer. How could he? He was so much less than before. Vader's suit was tight and agonizing. It was extremely uncomfortable and constantly made it impossible for the Sith. The suit was also hard to maneuver and extremely heavy. However, this constant state of torment began to fuel Vader and his power. The dark side flourishes in a state of agony and anger, and thus, Vader found power in his suffering. Despite his hindrances, Vader successfully destroyed the main Jedi, driving the rest into hiding. While Vader had lost the ability to perform some Force feats, he became more gifted with others. Many of his flaws became his greatest assets, using his slow, heavy suit to his advantage by utilizing the increased strength that came with it. Vader began endlessly drilling with his suit, and fully grasping how to master it. He also took full advantage of the limited training sessions with Sidious, devouring as much knowledge as he could. In moments where he was required to move swiftly, he used the Force to maneuver his suit in ways his body could not. Palpatine eventually took note of his student's power, placing various obstacles in his way to truly test if he was as gifted as he seemed. Despite how difficult or horrible the task, time after time Vader returned triumphant, his command over the dark side and the lightsaber more magnificent and terrifying than ever thought possible. Witnessing this, a feeling creeped over Palpatine he had not felt in a long while, that of fear. While Vader was partially crippled, he had now become far more dangerous than imaginable following his injuries. Seeing this, Palpatine began to further a search for an apprentice that could possibly rule the galaxy after his death. Time after time, apprentices came and fell, sometimes by the difficulty of a mission given to them by Palpatine, and some by the hand of Vader himself. Watching this, Palpatine began to wonder if Vader was the one to truly be able to overthrow him and take his place as Lord of the Sith. Although at first, Palpatine wished to keep Vader somewhat restrained in his suit in fear of him and his potential to overthrow him, it became clear that Vader was the